My name's Ivor Bowen, I'm a detective sergeant, and I've been with Hampshire Police for a long time now, 20-something years now. I sort of work on the fringes of the cyber world now. I was a cyber protect officer last year, but I've kind of moved into a little bit more sort of project work at the moment over the last few months, just trying to help sort of develop what Hampshire Police does. So why am I here? That's what I'm going to try and get across to you, what's up there. But the real reason I'm here is because, sadly, you've got things, you've got stuff that people would want to take and steal from you, which is and you're vulnerable to it. Maybe no more than other organisations, or maybe no more than other individuals, but you've got things that somebody else would want to steal from you, which is a sad fact, particularly looking at, bearing in mind the sector that you work in. But unfortunately, you've got information and you have money. And there's always somebody around that's prepared to try and take it from you. So what I want to try and do is leave you with a few thoughts and a few ideas today that you can go away with and hopefully help keep you safer. Now, you might know a lot of this already. I don't know. There's quite a number of people here. You might know less about it, So I'm just trying to hit it from quite a sort of a high level. We're just going to touch on a few things, cover quite a bit of ground, not in too much depth. So before May last year, who'd ever heard in this room? Show of hands, please. It's interactive. This, by the way. Who'd not heard of ransomware? Okay, only a handful, so most of you had heard of it. Who had cybercrime sort of, right at the top of their list of priorities to cope with and manage? One. There you go. Well done, sir. Probably the NHS and WannaCry and the extent of it, I think, has probably raised the profile of cybercrime in the last sort of 12 months or so, which is a sad fact because actually it's been around for decades, really, in truth. But that's how it is, isn't it? And it quite often takes a little bit of publicity and something to go horrendously wrong, unfortunately, for the NHS in this case and a number of other businesses around the world. It takes something like that for it to kind of raise its profile and for people to start to take notice. But that's the way it is. And now it's barely out of the media now, is it? I mean, that's just 4 little articles I found the other day, but actually there's hundreds of them if you go looking for it. There's a lot happening in the cybercrime world now, and it's forever changing. And policing and charities, actually, we've got something in common. Generally, we probably don't have a massive amount of money. I know the police doesn't. Despite the budgets that you might see. But there's a lot of other challenges in dealing with cybercrime for both the voluntary sector and for policing. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of those. One of them is the attitude towards security. So historically, certainly from what, from my experience, if I mention the word security to people a few years ago, they'd snigger, laugh, sneer. What the hell are you talking about? That's not my, that's not down to me. That's not my responsibility. It's too expensive. It takes too much time. It gets in the way. It's inconvenient. That was the kind of attitude that we had towards security in the physical security world. And to be honest, it's not really changed that much really with cybersecurity. In fact, in many senses, it's even more complicated because now we're talking about these things here, computers and ones and zeros and how all that works. And people don't really understand it, I don't think, in a lot of cases. So the attitude towards it is a challenge. The understanding of what's out there, the threats, how it can manifest itself, what the impact on the voluntary sector can be, that's also a challenge. That's a challenge for you, isn't it? It's also a challenge for policing to try and help you overcome some of these issues. It's fair to say I don't think I'd be far off the mark if I said that probably there's been a bit of a reluctance amongst organisations, and I think probably the voluntary sector I can include in that, to report incidents of cybercrime. And there's probably one or two reasons with that, particularly with organisations where reputation is important. Why would you want to report a cybercrime when, if it leaked out, your reputation could be damaged? And with the voluntary sector, reputation is key, I would suspect. You want people to give you money, don't you, after all? I'd be surprised if you said anything different. Have you always had the confidence in policing to deal with it? Possibly not, I've got to say. Let's be honest, policing's, as it always is catching up with the cybercrime world. Everything new that's a challenge to policing, we always have a little bit of a lag to catch up with it, and there's a lot of work going on. I can, if I can't do anything else today, try and reassure you there's a massive amount of work going on locally, regionally, and nationally to try and improve the way that we deal with cybercrime. But you may not have always had confidence in the way that we deal with it, and I get that. And then, I don't know how many of you have ever had to report a cybercrime. You've perhaps tried to go through action fraud. That's been in place for a few years now. It's been clunky. Action fraud is where you must report fraud, as you might gather, and cybercrime now. It's kind of a central place to report it to, and it's not always worked that well. Again, it's taken time to improve, and I'm reassured, I'm told that there are going to be some improvements to it coming out very, very soon. But they are a number of reasons why the voluntary sector may perhaps have had a reluctance to report or deal with cybercrime, and hopefully those things will improve. Policing, if I can get this to move, policing's had its own issues dealing with cybercrime, not least jurisdiction. You can sit at your laptop in the Philippines and you can attack a network or a company or an individual the other side of the world, because that's what the internet does for us. It connects everybody. Well, we don't have too much jurisdiction in the Philippines, nor in Iran, nor in China, the Ukraine, Russia, any of these countries where cybercrime is fairly big business. Policing in Hampshire Police, I've got absolutely no jurisdiction in those areas whatsoever. So there needs to be an awful lot of cooperation, which doesn't always, it's getting better, but it's not always been there between us and forces overseas. It's very easy to stay anonymous online. You can go and find yourself a number of websites out there where you can create a fake pseudonym, an alias, and it will give you a name and it will give you a date of birth. You might even be able to get one that will give you a national insurance number, credit card numbers, telephone numbers, address, anything that you need to create a fake ID. And not only that, but things like encryption and virtual private networks, VPNs, provide you with the means to stay more or less anonymous online. It's very hard to catch somebody if you don't know who you're targeting and who you're trying to find. The skill set, obviously, cybercrime requires a considerable set of skills for investigators to be able to deal with things, which, let's be honest, historically has not always been there. Technology is changing all the time. How many social media apps are there out there now? Don't ask me, I've no idea, but I know it's in the hundreds. I mean, most of us probably know a handful. I don't know many because I don't use it hardly, because that's just me, I'm old. Access to threat intelligence. What's that about? Well, the problem with the internet is the police don't govern it. The internet is kind of run by a lot of companies, a lot of private organisations who do have access to all the ones and the zeros and the little bits that are running around the wires around the world. But they don't always and haven't always wanted to share that information with policing. So all the stuff that's going on the internet is actually quite hard for us to get to. Again, it's improving, but it's been a challenge in the past. I talked about perhaps the reluctance of organisations to report it. If we don't know what's happening, how can we target our resources in the right place? There are not that many cops around in Hampshire and regionally and nationally, and there's even a tiny percentage that actually deal with cybercrime, because actually there's an awful lot of other stuff that goes on. So we have to be able to put those resources in the right place at the right time, hopefully. And the skill set to get involved, and that humour me with the next slide, the skill set to get involved in cybercrime is so low now that virtually anybody in this room in about 15 minutes, half an hour, would be able to commit a cybercrime.
What is going on, guys? Boy, days now, welcome back to another video. So in this video I'm going to be showing guys how to DDoS any IP addresses or any websites.
Just follow it for a minute.
The first thing you want to do is just get a IP address. I showed you guys in my previous video on how to get any IP addresses from Skype for free online. And then once you have the IP address, you're just going to come to this website. I will have the link in the description, and then just click on it, and then you will get to this website, and then just copy the IP address in here, and then type 80 in here, and it goes up to 120, so I'm just gonna type that. Here is the captcha. You're just going to answer the question here, and then click on start. But sometimes it says invalid or expired captcha. You're just going to do this again and type 6 because it equals 6, and then click on start. As you can see, it says stress test sent successfully, which means he's getting DDoS now. He will not have a Wi-Fi connection for a while now. So I'm just gonna open up CMD to make sure it's right. You're just going to type ping and then his IP address or whatever website you're doing, and then type -T -L 1500, and then click on enter. So as you guys can see, when it says request timeout, that means that he just got DDoSed. He don't have Wi-Fi now. So that's how you guys DDoS people really easy. So that was it. I hope you guys enjoyed. Please subscribe, like, and comment, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Peace.
He rattled through that, didn't he? That's just a YouTube video, you probably gathered. And you can go online and you can find any number of those types of videos which will show you what that was showing you was how to commit a denial of service attack, which I'll tell you about a little bit in a minute. There's loads of those videos out there. Any of you could have done that. Honestly, you might not necessarily, on the black screen that was there, you might not necessarily have understand all the timeout and the milliseconds and all that was showing up there. I don't know how technical you are. Maybe some of that went over your head a little bit, but the actual principle of what he's done there was really easy. And in fact, back on one of the early slide with the news reporting, one of them was about the arrest of somebody that runs or ran what they call a web stressor website. Web stressor reads denial of service, which is basically a way of taking a website down. There are legitimate uses of web stressors to test how resilient a website is, but actually it can also be used to bring a website down. You can do that. I don't recommend it, but it's very, very easy. You can go on YouTube, and that I just found by literally 30 seconds, and there were loads of those out there. It's all out there, which means obviously that actually almost anybody can commit cybercrime these days and make something out of it, and it won't cost you a lot to get that done. Some businesses do it to their competitors. Again, don't do it. Please don't do it. But yeah, that's what some people do. They bring their competitor's website down because they can. So who does it? Who commits cybercrime? There's a little list of categories of people. We love to categorise people in policing. And I mean, basically, there's an awful lot of different ways that this can be done, and there's an awful lot of people out there that are prepared to do it. Organised crime groups, well, organised crime has been around since whenever, but now they're much more technical. Now they're clever. Now they're on the internet, because there's less chance of getting caught. It's very, very easy. And they make lots and lots of money out of it, organised crime groups. I wouldn't be completely unfair to say that Eastern Europe is a bit of a haven for organised crime groups. There are obviously organised crime groups all over the world, but certainly we in the UK have found that Eastern Europe seems to hold a number of them, and that impacts on the UK quite a bit. Hostile governments, well, it's in the news. Iran, North Korea, China, Russia, they've all got a few problems with the UK and UK government and UK foreign policy. One of the ways they try and get back at the UK is through cybercrime. and trying to attack our critical infrastructure. But don't think as charities that you are immune from that, because if you do work overseas, for instance, or have any connections with charities overseas, your work is not always seen in a good light by every government. You probably know that. And those governments may feel that you're impacting on, or impacting in a negative way on their country and their society, and therefore they may want to bring down your business by attacking your business. It does happen. Hacktivists, go back a few years and you've got activist groups like animal rights groups, for instance, that did things for a cause, right or wrong. They did things for a cause. Hacktivists are similar in that they're doing something for a cause. Maybe it's a political cause, or maybe it's an animal rights group doing it for their cause as well. But basically, they're attacking sort of computers and defacing websites, writing things on websites, and that type of thing. It can happen to you. It can. Script kiddies it's a slightly derogatory term, but we shouldn't look at them in that way, because they're the cyber criminals of the future. But they're like kids that are sort of learning from YouTube videos how to do things online and how to hack. But, 13, 14-year-olds learning to do that sort of thing now, how good are they going to be when they're 17, 18, 19? The malicious insight. So we've got two insiders. One of the biggest problems that any organisation has, unfortunately, is its employees. Now, you've got some employees that will do things for a malicious reason, and then you've got some people that just do things because they make a cock up, basically, don't they? They make a mistake. Excuse my French. And what do you do about that? Because we're all human. We all make mistakes, don't we? But then obviously you've also got people that do it maliciously. Maybe you've made them unemployed, and they might have a reason then for attacking your network, your website, or whatever. And then you've got indirect attacks. So what do I mean by that? Well, you've all got other businesses, other organisations that you work with. You've all got suppliers, probably. You've all got people that you get your stationery from, for instance, or whatever. Other organisations, other charities that you're involved with, that you share money with. You are vulnerable because of their vulnerabilities and their incompetence as well. So that's something to think about. Who are the people that you're dealing with? Do you trust them? Do you trust their security? And how do cyber criminals go about doing what they're doing? We all think of cybercrime as being very, very technical, don't we? But actually a lot of it is all about how you can get tricked, socially engineered into doing something that you wouldn't necessarily want to do. A phone call, an email that persuades you to do something that, if you maybe thought about it for 5 minutes, you think that's probably not the brightest thing I've ever done in my life. But people fall for it all the time. Why do we fall for it? Because we're all human again, aren't we? We all, I don't know, if the boss tells us to do something, generally we're supposed to do it. I think that's right, isn't it? I think that's how it works in business, that's how it works in the police. So if somebody pretends to be my boss, and I'm convinced that they're my boss because the email they sent me looks pretty convincing, they might get me to do something that I'm going to later on regret. That happens all the time. That's phishing for you. So we are vulnerable to people that we like. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. So somebody does something for you, and then later on they come back to you and ask you to do something for them. And that's a way of being socially engineered. Because what they're asking you to do later on may be to supply them with what might seem like some very innocuous information about what type of server you use, for instance. If you give that sort of information to an experienced hacker, he then can start work on identifying what the vulnerabilities are in that type of server, or that operating system, or that piece of software that you use. Hackers will often spend quite a lot of time researching their victim, their potential victim because they're looking for those vulnerabilities. There are websites out there that list the vulnerabilities that exist in software. So you've only got to go on the internet and find what those vulnerabilities are, and that gives you a starting point in how you're going to attack a website or attack a network. So phishing, who's not had a phishing email? Good. Not good, but everybody will have had a phishing email by now. I mean, and texts as well. I mean, I had one yesterday purporting to be from PayPal. Yeah, right. And Apple, that was one. I've had another one recently. Everybody gets emails, phishing emails. They're trying, the ultimate gain or ultimate aim, I should say, is they're trying to get you to do something that you shouldn't do because they want to take your money. And usually that's what it's all about. Even if they're after your data, it's only because they want to make money out of it at the end of the day, because it's all about money. Criminals are greedy. But that's what they're trying to get, data or money, normally. And they'll often do it with those phishing emails. And there's different types of phishing emails. Spear phishing, where they target an individual. They might target the guy that looks after the money, for instance, guy or gal that looks after the money. Or whaling, where they're targeting somebody at the top of the organisation, somebody that's a decision maker. So, yeah, different types, different tactics that they use. DDoS, distributed denial of service, I always fall over when I say that, which is just about bombarding a website normally, or a server, with a lot of traffic to make it fall over, make it cease to provide a service, which, you may not think, and it's not always a huge issue for somebody. If you don't use your website for anything other than advertising what you do, losing it for a few hours because somebody's bombarding it with traffic might not be a massive issue to you. But if you're like Amazon, or you sell a lot of goods or whatever through your website, losing it for even half an hour could mean hundreds of thousands of pounds. It would mean millions to Amazon if they lost it for half an hour. Although, to be fair, they're never likely to. Their contingencies are massive. Malware is just a piece of software that's intended to attack your system, either to take data from it or to do what ransomware does, which is to lock it so that you can't access your files, your folders, until you pay a ransom. Now, policing, what do we say? We say with ransomware, you should never pay the ransom, because it just encourages the criminal to carry on and do what he's doing. He'll come back to you again, and he'll come back and try and hit you with another ransomware attack. Yeah, that's the official line. I often get sort of told off for this. I would never say to you, don't pay that ransom, because I would understand that if everything you own has been locked by a criminal, by some ransomware, and you cannot get it back, other than by paying the ransom, who am I to tell you not to? It's a decision for you, isn't it, at the end of the day? The best thing is not to get caught out in the first place, so that's very much the best thing. Hacking, well, that's kind of what most people understand as being the sort of, the proper cyber criminal, where they're trying to access your network. They're trying to get inside your network, beyond the boundaries of your network, or they're trying to get behind your website to your database behind, because they want to take something from it. It's an illegal evasion of your space, basically. It's the cybercrime version of burglary, basically, yeah? And SQL injection is just a way of doing it. If you remember the TalkTalk event back, I think it was 2015, I think it was, where they got hit, they lost a load of data. That was through what we call SQL injection. It's actually something that's been around for donkey's years, though, so how TalkTalk ever got caught out by that is beyond belief, but it still happens. Databases are still vulnerable because they're not properly secured. And compromised websites, it is possible to go to a website and just by accident download something from that website, or something that's not good for your systems, a piece of malware, for instance, or just by websites can be compromised just by them being defaced. So people attacking the website and writing something on there that's sort of about their cause, for instance. That's just a very short number of ways that criminals will attack you or try to attack you, all sorts of different ways, very, sort of brief. there's a couple of examples or an example of a phishing email. So what are you going to look for with a phishing email? I always think the first thing to look for is don't necessarily look at the phishing email straight away. Is am I expecting this email? And if you're not, my tendency is to kind of hit delete, to be honest. Probably shouldn't do straight away, probably should look at it a little bit more. But, you know, if I'm not expecting it, I'm suspicious straight away. I would say that, you know, the criminals are getting better at these, much, much better, because a few years ago you'd find spelling mistakes and grammar mistakes and all sorts all over it. Well, they're getting better at that now, as you'd expect. But, you know, you can still look out for things like, you know, have they used your name, you know, or have they just gone, dear customer? If it's from your bank would probably use at least maybe your first name or at least your last name now. They should be able to, because it's really easy to do it for them. So look out for signs like that. You know, the sender address, I mean, you can see the one up there, the sender address does not really look like a genuine company's house sender address at all. And there are some other things to look out for as well. If you hover over, these are really simple things, but they really can help you. If you're not aware of them, great, you're going to learn something. If you are, cover your ears for a minute. Just looking at a link in an email, just hover the mouse over it, and you'll actually see whether, it will tell you whether it's actually coming from where it purports to come from. You can make a link look like it comes from anywhere that you want it to, but the underlying link behind it will tell you where it's come from. And if it doesn't look right, if it doesn't look like it's come from NatWest or wherever, delete it, get rid of it. This is not so much about phishing, but this is one I found. This a few months ago I found this. It's actually a website. I don't know if you know this one, Third Sector. It actually has something to do with the voluntary, and it's because I did one for some charities a little while ago. So I looked this up. To be fair to them, it's changed. But if you look at the top left-hand corner, it says "not secure," and it's next to it, it says it's got www. Yeah. What it should say is HTTPS, which tells you it's a secure website. Now this, it says not secure, and what are they asking for? Just about 2/3 of the way down. Email, okay, not terribly sensitive, but a password. And you might think, well, so what? Well, so many people use the same password across websites, don't they? So you put a password into there. That's not encrypted, or wasn't at the time. So it means that somebody sat monitoring your network or monitoring your your network or your home email or whatever, and it's possible, it's doable, they could capture your password and read it because it wouldn't be encrypted. Well, and then go and try some other websites that they might know that you use, because like we all do, we're a bit foolish, we use the same password for the same, for different websites. They have changed it now, to be fair, but that was only a few months ago. Really, this is basic stuff now to have your website secure. What impact can cybercrime have? Lots of bad things can happen to your organisation if you don't get this right. Now, you've probably all been thinking about it, I expect. You've all done an information audit over the last few months? Because of GDPR? Sorry, I mentioned it, no. You should be kind of on top of some of this, hopefully, but in terms of, the impact, I've mentioned reputation. If your reputation is damaged, you lose money, you lose customers, don't you? At the end of the day, that's what happens. You lose income, you're not going to get as much money. What sort of a charity are you going to be if you don't get much money, You could lose access to your data in your system, so ransomware. If you lose access to your data, you could go out of business. It happens. Businesses, charities, they go out of business because they lose it. You could lose your money and your data. You could be hit with fines. Sorry, I've got GDPR up there again. I wasn't going to say it. You could be hit by litigation. You could be sued, couldn't you, if it goes wrong? And you could lose the ability to deliver your service. There's a lot of different things that could go wrong for you. I'm not going to read all of those out, but there's some big numbers up there which mean that lots of money goes missing through cybercrime. A lot. We're talking billions and billions can go missing through cybercrime. The way you get around it, or the way to deal with it, is you've got to start asking yourself some basic questions. What's the culture within our organisation to security? it should come from the top. The person at the very top of the organisation should be driving the response to cybercrime and to security and information security in general within your organisation. If it doesn't come from the top, it will not happen. What's your risk appetite? You know, you've got to, I mean, that's another question that's going to get answered by the people at the top of the organisation, but how much risk are you prepared to handle? How much risk are you prepared to put up with? And then, what have you got that somebody else would want? That's an important question, because unless you know what you've got, you're not going to know how to protect it, are you? You're not going to know what to protect. And then you've got to start thinking to yourself, what happens if I lose that data, or if I lose that information, or if I can't access it anymore? What's the impact going to be? Is it just a minor, trivial thing? Okay, you might not need to worry too much about it. Is it, you know, sort of quite important, but not the most important thing in the world? Or is it catastrophic if you lose that information? Because I would say if it's catastrophic, that's where you need to be thinking about spending the money that you've put into your security. Now, I'm guessing that probably not everybody here puts a massive amount of money into their security at the moment. I don't know. If there's anybody that does, I retire in 11 months' time, so you know, I'll be coming looking for a job if you do. So what's risk all about? So risk is about identifying what's important to you and what the impact is and how likely it is that that threat or a threat is going to impact on you. Because that's where the money's got to go. If you've got high risk, that's where you need to put your money. And the way you're going to manage risk, normally there's about 4 ways of managing it, although usually 1 or 2 of them are most appropriate. Most of the time, we're going to try and reduce the risk. And that would be by, you know, maybe encrypting a device. So you reduce the risk of somebody being able to access data, or using encryption when you're online. So you go to secure websites. That reduces the risk. You can accept a risk, and that's absolutely fine if you think it's low risk, but you must document that you've accepted that risk, because somebody might come back and question that later. You can transfer risk perhaps by getting some insurance. Another one is if you go into an agreement with another organisation for them to provide you with a service, you get a service level agreement, because that puts the onus on them to provide you with that service and transfers the risk. You can avoid a risk by not doing something at all. You know, don't do an activity, because that's risky. What you should never do is ignore risk. And if there's one thing to take away from this, is never ignore risk. The worst thing you can do. Right, so some basic steps. Right, I'm not going to go through this in massive detail, because what you've got is later on you'll see a couple of slides that will point you towards some advice on the National Cyber Security Centre website. And I make no apology for the fact that most of that, apart from a couple of bits, comes from the advice that they have created for charities. So I'm kind of using that as a bit of the background here, a foundation for this. But you've got to back up your data, okay? Make sure that if you back up data, you back it up regularly. Make sure that you test that you can retrieve that data when you need it. Don't leave your backup device, whether that be the cloud or whatever, connected to your systems all the time. Because if you get hit by ransomware, some strands of ransomware will go looking for that backup, and they'll just encrypt your backup, which would be slightly embarrassing and very, very awkward for you. Mobile security, laptops, mobile phones, you know, we all use them, and a lot of people use them for their organisation now, don't they? So, you know, you've got to think about keeping them encrypted and maybe have them password or PIN protected. You know, laptops, for instance, you can actually you can get locks for them, so that if you've got it on a table, you may have seen those videos of the moped thefts or not thefts, but the moped thieves in London, where they stop outside a cafe, run in, grab the laptop off the desk from the table nearest the cafe, and run out again. You know, that might not sound like cybersecurity. It is, because you've got all your data on your laptop, haven't you? Mobile remote wipe. So if you get your laptop or your phone stolen, enable remote wipe on it so that you can remotely wipe it, believe it or not. Use antivirus. Every device, every end device should have antivirus on it to protect you, to protect the device from malware. Patch management, what's that about? Well, every bit of software that you've got on your device will need patching, will need updating. Vendors, all the antivirus companies, they all release patches regularly. Now, depending on your network, you might have to do quite a sort of comprehensive plan in patching, because sometimes patching can actually cause more problems than it's worth. In that it can send your systems offline, so you kind of sometimes need to be a little bit careful about it. But the general advice is for most devices, have your patches on automatic update. Password management. Make sure you've got good, strong passwords. Lots of different theories on what's a good, strong password or passphrase. 3 random words, more than 10 characters, using numbers, uppercase, lowercase, characters. Kind of the length of the password is really important. You really do need to be looking at probably 3 random words or a passphrase, the line of a song, for instance, and then mix the numbers and the letters up so that it becomes really, really hard to crack. Because there are software out there that can crack passwords very, very easily now, and it's the length of it that protects you. You should have policies around passwords as well within your organisation as well. How often you reset your password, how often you have to have a new password. All of those types of things, you need to think about it. Staff awareness training, really, really important. This has actually been left off by the National Cybersecurity Centre. It's not on the charities guide, but staff awareness is so important. Understanding, how you are vulnerable as an individual, and getting you to be able to recognise those phishing emails, or understand what your responsibilities are, within the organisation about keeping data and information secure, and then be prepared, have a plan. So if you do get hit, what are you going to do about it? Who are you going to go to? Have you got a company that's going to come and restore everything for you? Have you got an expert somewhere that's going to come and help you out? You need their phone number, don't you? Probably not on the computer that's just been locked either. That's not going to help. So maybe have a folder. Maybe have a business continuity plan somewhere, hard copy, or a disaster recovery plan, hard copy somewhere. Make it available to more than one member of staff. I could rattle on for ages, I'm not going to. But have a plan. You'll find that on the National Cyber Security Centre website. If you just Google cybersecurity, NCSC, you'll find it. It's really, really useful. And actually, if I'm going to point you to one resource at the end of this, it's going to be their website. Really, really good. They've obviously only been around for about 18 months now, but it's the government website. It's an arm of GCHQ. You'd think that they'd know what they're talking about. They do. They provide some really good, sort of simple, not terribly technical advice to a whole range of different sectors and organisations. And I'm going to push you in that direction to read that. There's also 10 steps to cybersecurity, which is kind of getting a bit more technical and a bit more in-depth. But again, you can find that on that website. I'd encourage you to have a look. You can also try Cyber Essentials, which is a scheme where you can get accredited against those 5 different areas there. I mean, most of that I sort of kind of covered, a bit rushed, admittedly, and I apologise, but I covered earlier. But you can actually get somebody to come and have a look and see whether you meet a standard. And that can be quite good for you as well. If you really want to go to the whole hog and absolutely tie everything down, ISO 27000 is international standard. That's the one to get. I doubt you'll want it, but to be honest, you could actually look to achieve the standards without getting the accreditation, though. Bear that in mind. And then going back to your own staff awareness, there's a lot of free stuff out there on the internet. This is one I did a few years ago. It's really, really good. I think it's still up there. FutureLearn, great website. You can pick up some sort of free courses that you can do that just upskill you, get your awareness of different things, and this one's obviously about cybersecurity. And if you need to report a cybercrime, then Action Fraud, that is the place to go. Action Fraud don't investigate, they do some background checks on the information that you provide them. And then if they think that there's a viable investigation, then they send it out to the relevant local force to investigate. So, yeah, don't expect them to be coming blues and twos down to meet you, because they won't. But you'll have a very pleasant conversation with them on the phone, I'm sure. Thanks for listening.